In so doing, that is where we found 11 little children huddled together to fend off the cold. But they had no shoes on, they did not have jackets. They were crying and huddled together. And we rushed up to them and said, "Where do you belong? Where are your parents?"
Mhm.
Well, they couldn't understand us because we were speaking English and they Japanese, of course,
Right.
but they did say, "No mama-san, no papa-san," when we went from Tokyo to Japan and all over. And, we said, "We have these children in our room, that are we have to find a place for them." He said, "You have what?" And then when we told him, he said, "Does anybody know?" And we said, "Well, the maids on the floor, they've helped us get food and everything." And he said, "You've gotta get rid of them." I jumped up as fast as I could. It was like hot oil going through my body. It wasn't, of course, but that's what it felt like. And I walked down those steps. I glided down those steps. I not only didn't have any pain, I had energy like I'd always had. And as I sat down, there was something that happened to me that my body floated up to the right hand side of the podium in a pink cloud. It was like I was in a pink cloud,
Mhm.
just floating up there. I don't know the length of time it was, but I heard Catherine speaking. I don't know what she was saying.
Did you know there's a technology that's actually an app on your phone that uses sound waves to tell your brain what you want your brain to do? We had a young man that was on a guest on our podcast, the Mike Litton Experience, who had a traumatic brain injury. He was sleeping 3 hours a night. He's using Newcalm now and he's sleeping more. Go to newcalm.com, Mike15 promo code. Newcalm.com, promo code Mike15 for an extra 15% off. Go today.
Welcome to the Mike Litton Experience podcast. Everyone has a story, and our passion is to help them tell it. Mike is passionate about being a father, a teacher, a realtor, an investor, and a leader. And now, introducing the host of the Mike Litton Experience, Mike Litton.
Sara O'Meara, thank you so much for being our guest on the Mike Litton Experience. I'm super excited for our time together. And like we talked about before we hit record, everybody has a story, and our passion is to help them tell it. So, with your permission, we're going to start with where you were born, go up to today, and then we want to talk about Childhelp. We want to talk about your book, Healed, that you were kind enough to send me. Love this book, by the way.
Thank you.
And we also want to talk about the little chapel, right? So that where you're doing healing, it's monthly, right? You do monthly,
Yes, yes.
right?
Actually, May 18th, this month is my last one before fall because we don't do one in the summer.
It gets a
Arizona's
little warm where you
hot.
are. It gets a
Yes,
little warm where you are. I
that's
certainly
for
understand.
sure. That's for sure.
I certainly understand. So thank you again for being here. So where were you born?
I was born in Knoxville, Tennessee. I had a wonderful father and mother, and they were always the chaperones at any of the events where we had to have chaperones because they were very popular with all the other kids.
Yeah.
Um, After I graduated from high school, I went away to college. I went to college in New York, and then I graduated from the Sorbonne. I was going to go back to teach at the University of Tennessee,
Mhm.
at that time called drama. It was about acting, but in those days, way, way back, that's what you graduated in, drama.
Mhm.
So there was one particular thing that they did not have at the Sorbonne for me to get the credit on,
Mhm.
and that was in acting the part of directing. And so I went to the Pasadena Playhouse right from college in California. And uh, while I was there, an agent saw me in a play at the Pasadena Playhouse
Mhm.
and asked if I would like to try my luck at acting. And I thought, boy, that sounds a lot better than drama at the University of Tennessee. And those were the days that you called your parents and said, may I?
Yeah.
Even though I was the age I was, I said, is there a chance that I could stay here and try my luck at acting? And my father said, yes, but you can only do it for 6 months. I will pay for an apartment. I will pay for your pictures. I will pay for your car to be there. But in 6 months, if you haven't made it, you must come home, young lady. So, when you're young, you think 6 months sounds like forever.
Mhm.
But I was extremely fortunate because I got a part pretty much right away on the Ozzie and Harriet show. Now, everybody listening is probably too young to have ever heard of Ozzie and Harriet, but it was a family show. It was the longest running show at the time, very popular. And I played the girlfriend of David. There were two young boys in the film, and that mostly were about them.
Mhm.
And I met a girl on the set called Yvonne Lime, and she played Ricky's girlfriend.
Mm.
We ended up seeing each other at the Hollywood uh, Christian group,
Mhm.
and then we ended up teaching Sunday school at the Hollywood Presbyterian Church at the same time. So we became friends, and she was doing a lot of USO shows. She had been an actress for some time before I ever joined it. She was in shows in the movie with Elvis Presley, and ended up dating him. And so I met a lot of people actually through her
Mm.
in the industry. So she asked me if I would like to go on a USO show one weekend, and I went with her, and we roomed together at the military base. And she lived with her mother at the time in Glendale, California, and I
Mhm.
lived in Hollywood. And I said, why don't you just come live in my apartment with me? Because I'm only 5 minutes from the studio, and we had to be there by 6 o'clock for makeup. And so she did. So we ended up being roommates and really best friends. Well, there was something going on that the USO were asked to try out for, and that was to entertain our troops in Korea, Okinawa, and Japan. The difference between this USO show and others was that they took you to bases that were too far out for most USO shows to go because of the time constraints.
Mhm.
But this was almost a 3 month time that you would be gone. The reason so many people wanted to be selected was because they had GS-16 rating, which is the rating of a general, which meant that everywhere you went, you were treated as a general. Your seating, the planing, on deplaning, and everything. It was General Lime and General Buckner. My name
Wow.
was Buckner, and her name was Lime. So naturally, everybody wanted to apply. There were only over 500 applicants.
Wow.
Now, here's the thing, Mike. She went on one day for the interview. I went on the other day for the interview.
Mhm.
They did not know we even knew each other, and we were the two selected to represent America on this goodwill type tour.
That's awesome.
It was awesome. Now, we thought we were the greatest
Oh,
actresses
yeah.
that ever lived.
And you're how
Yeah,
old?
to take it. We were chosen. So
How old were you?
we had to meet. Oh, how old? We were, let's see, 21.
Yeah. So all of 21 years old, and you're being treated
Oh,
like a general. Okay.
oh, yes, that was really something. So we were delighted, of course. And there was a General Tully with whom we met about the tour. And the first thing out of his mouth is, I want you girls to know it had nothing whatsoever to do with your acting ability. And he said, you're not too beautiful. You're just what we want. Well, our egos went from high to low.
Mhm.
Uh, we said, well, what is it that you want? And he said, well, the typical looking girl next door, because our men are getting involved on radar sites and places that are not very, very well occupied. The women in Japan were uh, going up to those bases. They were getting pregnant and having children. So they wanted them to remember that there were girls back home that they're waiting for the men. We were even given a script of what to say when we danced with the individual soldiers and
Wow.
the whole thing. So we did our little act, and then we would dance with the soldiers. We'd talk to them about that everyone couldn't wait until they got back home, and we were sure they had a girlfriend that would, but that kind of thing. This is also an interesting part of this because it shows you God's hand all the way through.
Hmm.
The trip was really scheduled for the summertime,
Hmm.
and they changed it to the fall, which was fine with us. We didn't care when it was. And when we went in the fall, Tokyo had the worst typhoon they'd ever had on record.
Oh my goodness.
And we were not allowed to go out of our hotel room. There was a flag on the military hotel where nobody should go out. Well, it was the coldest winter on record, too. So we were bored and we were young. And so we said, let's sneak out. So
Mhm.
we went through the basement of the hotel and we could see the devastation that occurred from the typhoon. In so doing, that is where we found 11 little children huddled together to fend off the cold. But they had no shoes on, they did not have jackets. They were crying and huddled together. And we rushed up to them and said, where do you belong? Where are your parents?
Mhm.
Well, they couldn't understand us because we were speaking English and they Japanese, of course,
Right.
but they did say, no mama-san, no papa-san. So we knew they had either been orphaned by the typhoon or misplaced somehow.
Right.
So we snuck those 11 children up the stairway from the basement of the hotel to our room. We gave them a hot bath and fed them, and then approached the colonel who had been assigned to us. He traveled everywhere with us to take
Mhm.
us from base to base, even on the airplanes when we went from Tokyo to Japan and all over. And we said, we have these children in our room that are we have to find a place for them. He said, you have what? And when we told him, he said, does anybody know? And we said, well, the maids on the floor, they've helped us get food and everything. And he said, you've got to get rid of them. You have to get rid of them now. He
Hmm.
said, you have no idea the paperwork that you're causing me.
Oh boy.
He said, you have to get rid of those children. And we said, well, we will, but you have to give us a list of orphanages at least where we can place them.
Yeah, someplace to take them.
Yes. And so he said, well, he could do that. And he did. But we started out with that list, and the story was always the same. We would take the children up to the front door. The cab driver became all involved with us, and he was our interpreter. And every time they were denied because they were full, and so many had been orphaned by the typhoon.
Hmm.
So now we had these children at night. And so we had to sneak them up the back stairway in order for them to spend the night with us. And they
Mhm.
spent the night with us in our room, all 11.
Hmm.
We made a deal with the cab driver to meet us down the back fire escape that we could take the children the following morning to pursue our quest of an orphanage to place them. We had been maybe at 3 other orphanages when we walked up, and the children did not want to get out of the car in front of this orphanage. We didn't understand why.
Yeah.
And they just absolutely, shivered and said, no, 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 no. And so it was because we found out they were turned out of that particular orphanage because they were of mixed blood. They were half American, half Japanese children, which meant they did not have a birth certificate at all from Japan. Japan would not claim them. America would not claim them. They were children without a birth certificate, and therefore they received no stipend for the child in an orphanage like the other full-blooded children. This infuriated us, and it gave us the fortitude to go back to the base and talk to the colonel. His name was Colonel Fling. And we said, you have to help us. These are our children.
Yeah.
They have nowhere to go. We've exhausted our efforts for an orphanage. And we said, we're not turning them out on the street. That's all there is to it. And he said, well, I do know of the director of Tokyo Gospel Missions, and he happens to be of mixed blood. And therefore, he has great empathy for this problem.
Yeah.
I'm sure he will help you. So we piled the children back in a cab and we went to, his name was, his and last name was Hope. We went to Mr. Hope and we said, can you take these children? We have no place to put them. And as he opened the front door to his very nice home, we realized there were suitcases piled up all. And we said, what does this mean? He said, I have to go back to America once a year because I have dual citizenship. But he said, I am so glad you stopped to help these children. He said, do you know that no one has done that? And we said, we just can't believe that. He said, I know of a wonderful Christian woman who has taken in some of the children. I think she has meager circumstances, but I do know that she has taken some half American children, as have I from time to time. But he said, since I'm leaving, we can't do that. So we piled the children again in the cab. And we were getting nervous because we had a show to do that night and we didn't know what we were going to do with those children. So as we pulled up to Mama Ken's house, it was a hut. There was no front door on it, no window panes. We walked on frozen ground up to her front door where there should be a front door. And inside there were two rooms, one on which she was preparing their food on hibachi, and the other that you could readily see with the children gathered around another hibachi to try to keep warm. It was a terrible scene for us because there were 10 children there that she was trying to care for, and there were two nails with thread-worn little jackets hanging on them. And we had never seen anything like that. We asked her if she would possibly take our 11, and if she would, that we would pay for them, plus we would pay for the 10 she had, if she would just take them, that we had no place to take them. And our interpreter explained to them that we were actresses and that we had to do a show and blah, blah, blah. She looked at me, just really strongly in my eyes. For a long time, I thought, oh, she's going to say no. She said, I trust you. And so we left the children there, knowing we'd be back the following day. We stopped our show and we said to the men, let us tell you about our day. And then we said, some of these children might be your children. So we asked them if they would come and put a front door on window panes. And we would go then to an open air market if they would bring their truck. And we would get them clothes and blankets and things like that. So they did. First of all, we passed the hat that night. And they showed up at our hotel room with stolen army blankets and sea rations and everything else, and lumber to put the front door on, the window panes. So Yvonne and I both said, God wants us to take care of these 11 children. They have nobody. They have nobody. And we said, that's why we had to be here during the typhoon. So we were good with that. But we kept going back every day and taking things. And people started leaving children on our doorstep and up the block and down the street. And it was pinned on them for the orphanage of mixed blood.
Mm.
So overnight, we became an orphanage, and the servicemen had to build on, build on, build on. And before we left to come home, we had over 100 children in our care.
Wow.
We came home, and at that, yes.
How long was that period of time?
That we were there in Japan?
Right.
We were there probably about 2.5 months because it was the longest, it was our stopping point to go to different places.
Gotcha.
So
you accumulated 100 kids in that time?
yes,
Wow.
over 100, a little over
Uh-huh.
100. So when we came home, we gathered our actress friends.
Mhm.
I don't know if these people are known by your audience, but it was Debbie Reynolds and Connie Stevens
Mhm.
and the twin boys of Bing Crosby
Mm.
and some of those young people that were starting out with us. And we got together to put on shows to raise money.
Mm.
And it was so funny. We had a big event at the Pasadena Auditorium, and we asked people to bring clothes for the children and things. And we had no idea that it would be so many. And here
Mhm.
we had all these clothes, and we had to get boxes and everything to put them in. And they did a story in the LA Times and showed our apartment where all these moving van boxes were stacked to our ceiling,
Mhm.
and what we had done while we were there, and we were hoping to send them over. Well, back to the story of when we came back from Japan. On the plane was Senator and Mrs. Gore, the older Gores,
Mhm.
and we were seated across from them it's a military plane. In other
Mhm.
words, they were sitting here, we were sitting there, and looking at each other. It just so happened that I had met their daughter at my debut in Tennessee.
Hmm.
And so we had a lot to talk about. We were talking about magpies, and a colonel came over, kneeling at my side, and said, "How the H have you gotten these seats?" I was supposed to be the senior military man on this flight and sit in your seat. And then we explained how that happened.
Mhm.
So um, we had to stop in Hawaii for fueling, and we were there, I guess, about 3 hours on the ground. And we talked to this man. He was going back to get his orders where he was going to be. He had no idea where they would be sending him next. He had been there in Tokyo, and his name was Colonel Hopkins. And so when we told him the story, and he said good luck, and we said goodbye, and we hoped he liked where his next assignment would be.
Mhm.
Well, I got a call from him because he has seen us in the newspaper and said, "Well, you really stuck to your word, didn't you?"
Mhm.
And he said, "How are you going to get them over?" And I said, "You know what? We don't know that yet." And he said, "Well, let's have lunch and talk it over and see if Operation Handclasp can't help you in that," which was, he was in the Marine Corps, but he said the Navy had ships going over all the time.
Hmm.
And he said, "I'll talk to you about getting him." Well, that Colonel Hopkins ended up getting married to Sarah O'Meara.
Mhm.
So we ended up marrying, and we had started by the time I was married to him with having redone a complete orphanage from the ground up.
Mhm.
Then we had to build another one and another one and another one. We built 4 orphanages in Japan under the name of International Orphans Incorporated.
Mhm.
Well, by then I was married, Yvonne was married, we both had our children, and the children that we had found, and most of them were grown by then.
Hmm.
And we even sent a lot of them to Brazil because they were not accepted for jobs. The
Mhm.
only job they could get was pearl diving or in the meat factories, which was considered by them unclean.
Mhm.
So what we did was educate them in a trade, and those that wanted to go to Brazil, it ended up that we knew the people in Brazil with the government in Tokyo.
Mhm.
So they helped us by giving us land.
Hmm.
And we sent a lot of the children into Brazil because they were accepted there and and I understand it's huge now. I've
Mhm.
never been there. But these children were really beautiful children and so smart, so smart. Um, so now we thought that's our mission. We've finished it. We were just shocked when we got a call from our congressman saying Congress wants to salute you girls for what you have done. And we said, oh, we didn't even know they knew that. That's fantastic.
Mhm.
And they said, well, they want to send you over and they will present you with an award.
Hmm.
So on the way over on the plane, I said to Yvonne, um, you don't think they're going to ask us to go into Vietnam, do you? Because that was when the Vietnam War was going. And she said, oh, no. And then she said, well, they might. And I said, Yvonne, we have to sit here and make together a very compelling speech of why we cannot do this.
Right.
And so we spent the whole trip writing about what we called a gracious no, we can't because we have our family now, etc.
Right.
Well, they did give us the award, but General Green, who was Commandant of the Marine Corps, was sitting there, and he showed us pictures of children that were emaciated, that were
Hmm.
horrible looking, that it was something you would not want to see. And they said, you took on a very unpopular issue and you succeeded greatly. We need you to do this in Vietnam because we have a huge problem there
Mhm.
with the half American Vietnamese child. We didn't even look at each other and we both said in unison, we'd love to.
Mhm.
We got back on the plane and said, what have we done? Well, we came back and started chapters to raise funds
Yeah.
for these children. We ended up building 5 orphanages, a hospital for orphans, and a school for orphans. A minister in the Navy, a Navy chaplain, took our funds, and General Lewis W. Walt was appointed to be the one in charge of our orphanages. And I had a direct line to Vietnam, a separate phone to Vietnam in my home.
Mm.
And we would talk back and forth. We raised the money. He would select the sites, oversee everything, get pictures. And also, General Walt would come back from Vietnam to attend our major fundraising events
Hmm.
because we had gotten the Marine Corps Reserve Officers Association and the Navy League attached with us to help us raise funds for
Mhm.
these orphanages as well as our chapters. So they loved it because he was on the front of Life magazine so much,
Mhm.
and the men that had been in the service, admired what General Watt was doing. He was head of the 3rd Marine Amphibious Force over there. And so he came to one of our fundraisers and he said, Sarah, I may be calling you one day to tell you to not send over any more money because the president's let me know that we may be out of Vietnam.
Hmm.
I said, that will never happen. He said, well, if it does, you can't send any more money. it did happen, of course. He called me and he said, I've received word from the president. I have to get our men out. I said, well, what about the children? I said, you know, they're going to be killed because they're half American. The Viet Cong is going to kill them.
Mm-hmm.
And he said, I know. He said, but don't start on me. He was a big guy that was so soft-hearted. And he said, don't start on me, because he cared so much too. And he just couldn't think of that, trying to get his men out. And so we couldn't sleep that night. And we called our congressman and said, you know, Congress got us into this, and they're going to get us out, because these children are going to have to be saved. We have to get airplanes in there to get them out.
Mm-hmm.
And he went back to Congress, and that was the beginning of the Vietnam baby lift. I don't know if you've ever heard of it.
I have.
That's where we brought thousands of children into this country.
Mm-hmm.
Now, we were not an adoption agency at this time in any state. We are now, but at that point we were not. And so we called all the adoption agencies, and we said, we have children that will be here this week.
Mm-hmm.
If you have passed them to become parents, if they would take a half American child, they'll have one this week in their arms. Do you know that every single child was adopted that landed with our planes? Every single one of them by the time they reached America. That speaks very well of America.
Yes, it does. How many were there?
Well, some people say that there were like 15,000. Some say more. I mean, there were tons of children. The planes came in. We had them going to Seattle. We had them at Long Beach. Long Beach turned their complete base over to us, and we had children flying. We had our chapter women. We have pictures of all of it, and the chapter ladies would come and pick up a child from the airplane, walk on the back of the airplane, pick up a basket, walk out, and take them to the base where we bathed them, and then connected them with their new parents. And today, I mean, we laugh about that today with all the red tape. That would never happen, but they literally came with a paper that showed the name of the child and their name, and we just handed them the baby.
Wow.
And I know it. Wow, is right. We have met so many of those children after that. And when we go to events and they show the video and they show the part of us getting the babies off, they many times will stand up in the audience and say, I was one of those babies. And it's really wonderful to see what they have made out of their life. We had a fundraiser in Michigan one time where somebody got up from the audience and went to the microphone and said, I have to interrupt. He said, do you see me standing here? Do you see me? Well, imagine if I'm not here, because I wouldn't be here if it weren't for this baby lift where they brought me over. So we've had wonderful things happen. Well, then we really thought, after all this, now our orphanages were turned over to people that were running them in Japan, Vietnam. We no longer had the orphanages there. So we said, our husbands were so happy because they thought they had their wives back. And we were asked everywhere to give a talk about the Vietnam baby lift and how we did that and blah, blah, blah. So on the dais happened to be Nancy and Ronald Reagan sitting on the dais with us. And we gave our spiel about the Vietnam baby lift. And Nancy stopped us with her hand outstretched, coming back from the podium, and said, you're just the two to do it. You're just the two to do it. We said, do what? And she said, child abuse. It's the best kept secret in America. No one wants to touch it with a 10-foot pole. You will do it because of what you've done in the past. We said, we've never heard of child abuse, because you didn't. You never saw it in the paper.
Nobody ever talked about it.
Nobody talked about it. And frankly, I thought Nancy had lost it. I thought, keep talking about abuse in our,
Mhm.
So I said, well, that's so nice of you to think we could do this, but you know, we really we don't think that we're doing anything more. But I said, anyway, we'd have to do a feasibility study
Mhm.
to see about this problem. And I said, we've gotten our treasures down to zero because we gave all of our money to the organization. And so she turned to Ronnie and she said, I think we can get that, don't you? And winked at him. And so he said, yep. And the next morning, there was a check that arrived on my doorstep personally from the Reagans. Nobody knows how good these people were.
Now, what year was this?
Oh, Lord. I'm
Was
so
he
sick.
governor? Was he governor?
Yes, he was
Yeah.
governor running for president.
So he
So
was governor
picking
of
up the date.
California. Okay, I got you.
And
So this is in the 70s, probably 76.
yes,
Okay.
yeah. I think
Okay.
it was
Okay.
75.
Okay. That's all right.
Anyway, uh, so there was nothing to do but to put together the
Yeah.
best people that we could find in every arena, child psychologists, educators, law enforcement, the whole thing, and say, is this really happening? And
Right.
what is happening? Well, did we hear it? I mean, we could not believe they said the reason she said you don't touch it with a 10-foot pole is the laws protect the perpetrator, not the child.
Mhm.
And they said, our hands are tied. We can't do anything, but heavens, yes, it's happening.
That's the way it was back then.
Oh, absolutely, Mike, it was.
Yeah.
When we found this out, we were horrified what was swept
Yeah.
under the rug.
Yeah.
Nobody in America, but judges did not even believe it. When we dealt with judges, they said, oh, the child's making that up. That doesn't happen. And besides, you don't want to get involved in family issues. I
Yeah.
mean, it was a hard thing to sell. It was harder, actually, than the half American child in Vietnam and Japan.
Well,
That
that whole thing about not getting involved, right? That whole thing about not getting involved or not sticking your nose in other people's business and not getting involved in family, matters and that type of thing. That was sort of the way things were done. That didn't just come from judges. That came from everybody in leadership. And for
absolute.
Nancy Reagan to grab you that time, right? And to bring it up and to have that kind of an impact, that's a big deal. And that's something nobody talks about.
They don't. They
Nobody ever
don't.
talks about what a
And
wonderful woman she was.
absolutely.
And nobody talks about how enthralled she was such a big fan of Ronnie's. It was amazing, absolutely amazing. And that movie Reagan that just came out that Dennis
Yes,
Quaid
yes.
did had me in tears.
I know. I
I mean,
know.
it was, for a number of reasons. We lost my grandmother to Alzheimer's, and that speech that he gave at the end
Oh,
it
I,
was it was just tore me up. But it was also very inspirational, right? Because there were times in his life when things just weren't going the way they were supposed to go.
no.
And people grabbed him and said, "Hey, what about running for senator? Or what about running for representative?" And all of a sudden he's like, "Well, I've never been governor," right? you know, that type of thing, right? And it was all about how he could give back. It was all about how he could add value. And she grabbed onto that with him and supported him the whole way. That doesn't
He's
surprise me in the
young.
least that she did that. That's
No.
just the way they were made.
Well, when they were in the Oval Office, they had us there like 4 or 5 times a year, and they always gave a personal check. That showed you the
Yeah.
caring that they had in
Yeah.
their heart. It wasn't just a government check; it was
Yeah.
their check. And so, and they always were so gracious, thanking us over and over again, because we really did add the lot. We are now the largest organization in child abuse in the country, but I'll tell you what happened from there. When we put together this feasibility study with all the people that were of the highest rank of wherever they were. We brought them in from all different states. And we all agreed the first thing that we had to do was change laws. So Yvonne and I, we were then so young and so naive that we didn't know better. We went right to Washington, didn't have appointments, walked right into the senator's office and said that they had an appointment with us. And we just walked in and we talked to them. And eventually we got the laws passed.
Yeah.
The main law that was very important to pass, one of the first ones, is that that if anyone reported it and the judge determined that it was an accident, not that somebody abused their child, then they could turn around and sue the informant. So we got that law passed that if it was in good intentions and the police or whoever the director was in that state to first get the case, if they determined that it was not abuse, but that child had bruises from falling down the steps. But also it really mattered what kind of lawyer you had, because sometimes they get out of that even though it is abuse.
Yeah.
But that was the law that was changed. And then little by little, we changed the laws.
Yeah.
Then
Sort of
they
chipped away at it.
determined,
Yeah.
they said, America has to know what's happening to its children. And they said, we all said, yes, yes, yes. And they said, well, the only thing to do there, of course, is to get it out on television. Well, we talked about that, about having a special on television. But then we realized we don't have anything to point to as an answer. We're going to get all America disturbed and say, my gosh, I didn't know this was happening. I want to help. And
What's the solution?
where are they going to go?
Yeah.
So that's what caused us to build the very first village for children, residential treatment facility for abused children, strictly abused, not runaways, not orphans, not just abused children. We specialized in that. So when we got that built, we had the very first television special. We had known celebrities, doing it. And we had a landslide of funds come in from that.
Goodness.
And what happened is we shut down all of the phones in Beaumont, California, where the village was, because so many people were calling. But it's interesting who was calling. It was children, but it was adults. It was survivors.
Who
It
had
was
experienced it.
judges.
Right.
Judges calling us.
Yeah.
It was doctors. We were the only place in town, that showed what was happening.
Well, so I if it's okay with you,
Sure.
I'm going to ask you we're going to go back a little bit if that's okay. And we're going to ask you questions. Now at this point, real quick, Sara, this is the place where we're going to actually break in the program, and Annie, who's our editor, is going to edit in some messages, right? So when we come back, a lot of the things we're going to talk about, we're going to talk about the book Healed. We're going to talk about the little chapel. We're going to talk about a ton of things. We're going to talk about how you started a conversation that today we're seeing the ramifications of. We're starting to see things that we would have never seen without you blazing the trail. And we'll be right back. Did you know there's an app that has no side effects that allows you to use sound waves to tell your brain what you want it to do? It's called newcalm.com, and it's amazing. It literally uses sound waves. If you want to tell your brain to go to sleep, if you want to tell your brain to recover, if you want to tell your brain to put you in peak physical state, if you want to tell your brain to focus, if you want to tell your brain to take a power nap, you can do all of these things and more with newcalm.com. Go to newcalm.com today, promo code Mike15. Newcalm.com, promo code Mike15 for an extra 15% off. Okay, we're back with Sara O'Meara, the author of Healed, Your Miracle Awaits, right? The founder of the Little Chapel. You do monthly monthly healings in your little chapel behind your house. And it's in Paradise Valley, right? In Scottsdale?
Yes, it is. Paradise Valley,
And
Arizona.
this is the last one. May 15th is coming up pretty quick, and it's going to be
18th.
the 18th.
May
Pardon me.
18th.
May 18th is the last one until the fall because it gets really hot where you live, right?
Yes.
So you're gonna shut it down for a couple of months anyway, which you should. I totally understand. So before the break, we were talking about how you had started this by Nancy Reagan reaching out and grabbing you, right? And compelling you. I mean, the next day you had a check from them, a personal check. And how that sort of started a conversation that really honestly needed to get started. It was something that was so taboo back then and nobody talked about it. And one of the things that I'd like to do, if you're okay with it, is I'd like to go back a little bit and just ask you some things
Sure.
about your life, only because you have a fascinating life you've lived. And I want people to have more insight. I want them to learn more about you. And mostly what I want to do is because of you and your role as a role model, I want to create more people that do what you've done. I want people to get more involved. Okay. So growing up, who was the most influential person to you growing up?
Growing up to what age are you?
Well, I would say through high school.
Um, well, I think it was my father
Yeah.
who had great empathy, and he taught me always about kindness
Yeah.
and to reach out to others that were not as lucky as I was.
Yeah.
And so he taught me that side of life. But next, the most outstanding person in my entire life was Catherine Kuhlman, which leads me to my healing, if you want me to go into that.
Absolutely. Absolutely.
Well, I was 36 years old, and they found that I had cancer riddled throughout my body and only had 3 months to live, if that. I was single at that time, and I had 2 little boys to raise. And I was in the middle of Childhelp. We had built our first village and it was expanding. We then had the National Child Abuse Hotline and then prevention programs in our schools, and we are all over now, but that was building all of that at this specific time that I had cancer.
Mhm.
So I was so shocked that diagnosis. And as I was in the hospital room, the TV was on, and there was a woman that came on television named Catherine Kuhlman, and she was like an evangelist. And she said she was very dynamic, and she said, "If you believe in miracles, be at the Shrine Auditorium this Sunday because God will heal you." Well, it was just like that big finger was pointing at me. I thought, I have to be there. I don't care if it's a holy roller type place. I have to be there. I know I have to be there. So I thought this is going to be a real trip because the doctor said that he thought the soonest I could get out of the hospital was Wednesday. And this was Friday.
Mm.
The event that I would have to be at the Shrine Auditorium was Sunday.
Mhm.
So I said to the doctor, I have to go home. I have a lot of people to deal that can minister to my needs. I promise I will not get out of bed. I crossed my fingers under the sheet, but I told him I would not get out of bed because he said, if you do, you'll bleed to death. Because he said the incision was too deep and you have too long of an incision. He said, you will bleed to death. He said, you can't get up, go to the bathroom or anything else. So I knew though, Mike, I had to be there at that Shrine Auditorium.
Mm.
I called and said, I've seen your advertisement. And I said, I saw where people were standing in line for hours, and I can't do that.
Mhm.
I have an inoperable um, disease, and I really need to get into a special place that you go, um, like for wheelchairs or stretchers or things. And
Mhm.
he said, "Well, I can put your name on. You're very lucky. You're the last two." I knew I had to have somebody take me.
Mhm.
So uh, I was successful in talking the doctor out of it, and I got there. And so when I got there, my friend Jan, who took me, let me out of the car, and she was going to join me, but then I wouldn't have to walk. She could park. During that time, I walked up and knocked on the door, and they said, "We're so sorry, but it's filled. There's not one more seat left." And said that the fire department will not allow us. And I'm sorry, and bang went the door. My hope would, I can't tell you, I still feel that moment of
Yeah.
time. It was like all your hope had dissipated.
Right.
And so I came out to meet my friend to say, "We can't get in." When somebody came out and recognized me from Childhelp and
Wow.
said, "What in the world are you doing here, Sara O'Meara?"
Mm.
And I said, "I don't feel well." I didn't tell her what it was.
Mhm.
But I said, "And I wanted to be there, but I guess I can't." She said, "I came out to get a sweater for my car, but I want you to have my seat, and my husband will leave and give your friend his seat." Well, usually I would have been polite enough to say, "Oh, no, no, no." I said, "Oh, that would be wonderful." Well, she was seated way up in the balcony, which meant many, many steps.
Mhm.
And as I looked down, Mike, I was stepping in my own blood. I could see my footprints in the carpet. As I sat down, it was on the last balcony in the first row, and it was on the end seat.
Mhm.
And as I sat down, there was something that happened to me, that my body floated up to the right hand side of the podium in a pink cloud. It was like I was in a pink cloud, just
Mhm.
floating up there. I don't know the length of time it was, but I heard Catherine speaking. I don't know what she was saying, so it wasn't anything necessarily that went into my heart and soul, to hear. I just knew she was talking until she said, "There is a magnificent healing going on." And she said, "This girl has cancer riddled throughout her body, but it's all gone. God has saved her for a very special purpose." And at that moment, my body came back into the chair, and it was shaking so hard from the Holy Spirit, I understood later, that the entire row was knocked down like dominoes that were seated with me.
Hmm.
And that was the power going to me,
Mhm.
God's power.
Mhm.
Uh, I'd never felt that before. I'd been a Sunday school teacher, gone to church, and I never felt anything like that. So then Catherine came back and said, "Oh," I said, "God, I've never been to anything like this. I don't know. Could I be the one you possibly are healing?" And at that moment, Catherine said, "The girl will know it because it's like 1,000 needles going through her body at this moment. And she has a red dress sitting in the balcony." Well, I had a red, white, and blue dress, but mainly red.
Mm.
So the ushers, seeing all this, came over and knelt by my side and said, "Aren't you the one being healed?" And I said, "Well, I think so. Duh." You know, and they said, "Go down and give your testimony." Well, I didn't talk about things like that, much less go down and give my testimony. Thousands of people were there.
Mhm.
So I said, "Oh, I don't know about that." And when I said that, a voice came to me very clearly and said, "You mean I would do this for you and you would deny me?" I jumped up as fast as I could. It was like hot oil going through my body. It wasn't, of course, but that's what it felt like. And I walked down those steps. I glided down those steps. I not only didn't have any pain, I had energy like I'd always had. And I glided down those steps. Remember that now I'm in the back of the auditorium and she's way
Last
up.
balcony, right?
Yes, on the balcony. So as I got in the back, I remember through the curtains in the back to go in, there were a lot of people on the aisle that had been healed. And so I said to God, you see, I am here. I'm here, but there's no way I'm going to get up there to give my testimony. It's too crowded. About that time, Catherine came over to the end of the podium and stage, and she said, the girl in the very back with the red dress, the Holy Spirit is all over you, because that's the way she talked. And she said, let her through. So everyone parted and I walked up. I told the story exactly as it happened, just as I've told you. I did not leave anything out. And the usher then came up and said, Miss Coleman wonders if she could have your number. And I gave it to him. When I went to the hospital, to the doctor the next morning, because he had made an appointment before he saw any of his patients, and Yvonne and Don Fedderson, my good friend, took me, and when he took me into an examining room, my skin had healed up over the clamps. It wasn't even stitches back then; it was clamps. And so the doctor came running out of the examining room and said to the Feddersons, you have the kookiest friend I've ever seen. Her skin has healed up. Anyway, he did another test and the cancer was gone. And that was 53 years ago.
Yeah.
And so that changed my life. If you want to know who made the biggest difference, she did, because I ended up working with Catherine. She said, I would like for you to bring your x-rays and all the tests and be on my program. Now, I didn't want to go up in the Shrine Auditorium. Now I'm on national TV with Catherine. And she said, I would like for you to handle all my ushering at the Shrine Auditorium. So because she knew, because of organizing Childhelp, that I had done things like that before. So I did that for her. And then she called me back at stage after a service, and she said, Sara, I'm changing you now. I want you to take care of the wheelchair section and the section where the stretchers and everything come in that are terminally ill. And I said, Catherine, I'm not ready for that. I said, those that are healed, it's wonderful, but those that go home, those people are really hopeless because it's their last straw. I know how they feel. I said, I don't think I can do that. She said, oh, yes, you can. Boy, when Catherine said that, you just did it. And so.
She sounds like a force of nature to me.
Oh, yes, very much so. So when I was back there, when I say back there, I was behind curtains in an area, and she couldn't see from the podium where we were, but I could see a light around the person that she was going to call out to be healed. So I knew when she was going to call somebody out, just maybe a minute before she would do it, or it could be seconds, but I'd see a white light around them. And finally, I tested myself 3 different times. And then I went up to the person and said, the Holy Spirit is all over you. You're being healed. And then Catherine, it was like a walkie-talkie thing. She would say, there's a healing going on in the wheelchair section. The man fell off the roof. He's been in that wheelchair 5 years. You can walk. But I'd already told him the Holy Spirit was on it. So it lifted him, to that place where he trusted God and accepted him. And so then I told Catherine, I want to tell you something. I told her about the light. She said, Sara, don't you realize God's using you, that you have the gift of healing? Now, I thought she meant the healing of the children, because that's what we were in.
Yeah.
So I said, yes, isn't that wonderful?
Mhm.
And so then, not long after that, Catherine asked me to go to Israel with her. She had a wonderful wonderful thing there in all different countries, and uh, they had the earphones on to hear the message, and it was wonderful. They were from all over the United States and all over the different continents, and uh, we were having lunch, Catherine and Yvonne and I, on by the Red Sea one day, and she said, "Sarah, God has given you the gift of healing. You're not recognizing it." I said, "Oh, yes, I do. I see these children change, and I know what these therapists are doing, and I'm carrying on." We came home from that gift, from that day, from that trip to Israel, and Catherine died not long after that. I was really overcome, and so was Yvonne, because we had seen God in action.
Mhm.
And so to go to our churches and not see this happening, what God can do, and they're not using it, it was like kindergarten
Mhm.
compared to college.
Yeah.
So, we'd go to church and we'd sit there and think, you're not getting it. You're not getting it. And then we tried to find different healing services. And we're not saying they were not valid, but we did not feel the same power of the Holy Spirit. And then out of the clear blue, Danny and Rosemary Danny Thomas called, and we knew them. They worked with us at Childhelp. And Danny said, "Sarah, I have a priest sitting in my living room that cannot believe we know you. He's visiting from Massachusetts. He said, 'Can you come over for dinner tonight?' And I said, 'Yes, but why would he want to meet me?' And he said, 'Because he heard all about Catherine and never met her, and he has a wonderful gift of healing.'
Mm.
So I went for dinner and we talked like magpies. And at the end of the dinner, he was walking to the door with me, and he said, 'I want you to come by and have mass with me in the morning. The Thomases have a little shrine here, and take me to the airport so we can continue our conversation.' And I thought, oh, he thinks I'm Catholic because my name's O'Meara. So I said, 'Well, Father, I don't happen to be Catholic.' And he said, 'Well, what difference does that make?' I said, 'Well, none to me, but I thought it would be.' He said, 'You be here.' I was there. We talked like magpie. And when he got out of the car, he said, 'I don't know how, but we're going to be working together someday.' I thought, boy, I don't know how either. I'm a Protestant. He's a Catholic. I
Mhm.
live in LA. He lives in Massachusetts. When he got off of the plane, his bishop was there. And his bishop said, 'We're sending you back to Los Angeles to do a whole group of healing services. You'll
Mhm.
be there quite a while.' And he said, 'I have to ask you, this lady that did so much for Catherine Kuhlman and was such a friend, said she organized everything for Catherine at the Shrine Auditorium. Uh, could she do that for me at my services?' And the bishop said, 'Well, I don't see why not. She's Catholic, isn't she?' And he said, 'No.' And he said, 'Oh, I don't know about that.' And so he said, 'Would you just pray about it?' And he said, 'Yes.' The next morning, the bishop called him and said, 'She's okay. She
Mm.
can walk behind the Eucharist.' So I, Yvonne and I set it all up for the priest, Father Diorio, who just passed away about 2 months ago.
Mhm.
But his services, I felt the same power, and so did Yvonne. We loved him. He had a great sense of humor. He had a wonderful gift. And as I did different services with him, he asked me to come and do a workshop in Massachusetts. And it was a week's workshop.
Mhm.
And I did. I thought it'd be 100 people. It was hundreds and hundreds of people.
Mm.
And then at the last day, he said to the people that were there, I'm going to do something I've never done before. Any of you that have come to this service expecting a healing and did not receive one, line up over here, and I'll pray for you. And Sara O'Meara will stand on this side of the podium and she'll pray for you. And I rushed up to him and I said, "No, Father Diorio, you cannot do that. No, they don't know me. No, I'm telling him why I can't do it and so forth." And he said, "Take her over there to the ushers." I stood there and I said, "Dear God, don't let anyone be in my line. Please don't let anyone be in my line. I can't do anything for it." And then nobody was. They are all snake line with. And I said, "Well, God, maybe one," because it was so embarrassing. So I could see at the very back a man that was 6'5" and two children gathered around him and his wife. And he was bending over talking to them. And here he comes. I thought they've decided that they'll try me because they'll never get up to see Father Diorio.
Mhm.
And so he came up and he said, "Will you pray for me?" Do you know that I could not think of a prayer? I was so scared.
Mm.
And so I said, I put my hand on his chest and I said, "Dear God, heal this man." That's all I could think of.
Mhm.
And the children started screaming. And the wife looked up and they were saying, "Oh, look." So I opened my eyes and I got to see he had a inoperable tumor on his cheek that was
Mhm.
as big as a lemon. And I saw it go down.
Mm.
That was the first healing that God used me for.
Mhm.
From then, the line that thought they couldn't make it with Father Diorio came over and I prayed with them, Mike, for an hour and a half and about 80% of them were healed.
Wow.
So when Father Diorio took me back, he said, "Now, do you believe me?" And I said, "Yes, I do." He said, "Well, what are you going to do about it?"
Yeah.
"I don't know."
Yeah. What
Because,
are you going to do about it, you reluctant warrior, you?
yeah. And I said, "Well, I'll never fail to pray for anyone that asks me." He said, "That's a pretty good start."
Yeah.
Well, when I got home, my phone line, that was when they had tapes on the phone.
Mhm.
It was out. And
Mhm.
when I played it, it was people that had been there or heard about me and from Massachusetts and wondered if I would pray for them. And so I began praying for people every 30 minutes in my living room. And I was working every day for Childhelp. So um, there was a man that was healed from Michigan, and he was the developer of the Detroit airport. And he was a big developer. And he said, "You can't keep doing this in your living room. And I'm going to build you a chapel."
Wow.
And so that was the beginning of my chapel in Los Angeles. And from then on, everyone came to the healing services. But then God called us, Yvonne and I, and our families to move to Arizona.
Mhm.
And I remember saying, "You want me to build a chapel there, but I don't know anybody who's going to come." And I was told that was not my problem. And it's been filled ever since. In fact, last time and this time, there are people from 12 different states coming and 2 different countries, Switzerland and Canada.
Mhm.
So people come from all over. Why? Because of this book. They've
Mhm.
read this book. And do you know, Mike, that people that read the book sometimes are healed
Yeah.
by just reading
That
it?
doesn't surprise me in the least. That doesn't surprise me in
And
the least.
so that makes me feel so good that God can show them. It's
Mhm.
not about a person, it's about Him.
Mhm.
People, I don't have to be there. You know, we have a prayer warrior service the night before my chapel,
Mhm.
and people come and they're healed walking into the chapel. I'm
Mhm.
nowhere there near there.
Mhm.
And so, people tend to look at a human being and they reach out to me sometimes. I'm not the one to reach out to, it's God.
You're the conduit.
I'm the conduit.
You're the conduit. And this is part of your conduit. It's part of your tool. It's part of your bag of tools.
Yes, you're right, Mike. It is.
It's absolutely amazing. You can't read this book. You can't read this book and not be inspired.
I'm
There's no
so
way.
glad. I'm so
Can't
glad.
happen. So so let me ask you this. So we met through Mark Victor Hansen, full
Yes,
disclosure. I'm actually writing some books with him.
right.
And he could not recommend you fast enough to be on the podcast. He and I had a blast together. Absolutely had a blast. And by
I
the way,
know your son.
Crystal's going to be on later this week.
Oh, good.
And according to Mark, Crystal heard how much fun we were having. She was home when we were interviewing him, right? And she said, "Did you have as much fun with him as it sounded like you were having?" He said, "I had more. You really should be on." So he literally sent me an email right after with her cell phone number and said, "My wife wants to be on your podcast." We had too much fun, apparently. So, but what I wanted to do was, I know there are people, we're in 63 countries now.
My
And
goodness, that's
yeah,
fantastic.
absolutely amazing. I mean, we're not even 2 years old yet. August 15th will be 2 years old as a program. And you're episode 328, by the way.
Oh,
And so I know there are people listening to this around the world that are thinking about writing a book. Will you talk for a second about what made you write this book and what made you decide to become an author? Just because I know there are people out there that are going to be inspired by what you're teaching and what you've written and the life you've led. And I want them to understand sort of how you made that decision.
I made that decision because in prayer I was told to write this book. And my sermons are really almost written for me, Mike. It's almost like automatic writing. And at first, I kind of argued with God because I said, nobody knows me that well. I mean, they come to the services and I have 200 people there or 250, but I said, I'm not known by my name like that. And I was told, yes, yes, you will be, because we want the word out.
Yeah.
It's God's word, and you're teaching it from the right place.
Mm.
And so I sat down and I wrote the book.
Yeah.
And then I couldn't believe that it was #1 on Amazon. And then all of a sudden, people from different countries were coming to the chapel in different states and being healed. So then they tell their people, and you know how that goes.
Spreads.
But it's amazing what this book has done. I would have never believed it. I really never would have, because, uh, not many people know the name Sara O'Meara. They're not going to look for a book, under my name. Like Mark Victor Hansen, they know who he is. So whatever book he writes, they know his name. Also, Yvonne has written 2 books, and they are documented healings that have happened, that people have gone back to their doctors to verify that yes, indeed, it had to be a supernatural thing.
Yeah.
So she has written 2 books too on that. But my book is really about the gifts of healing and the fact that anybody can have a miracle that is just awaiting for them. But they have to do something. They have to trust and have faith. That's their part.
Yeah.
God does the rest.
Yeah. You got to step out, right? You
Absolutely.
got to take that first step. And oftentimes it's getting out of your own way, right?
Absolutely. Yes, you're right.
Stepping out in faith is something that oftentimes is out of your comfort zone, right?
Yes, definitely.
You just take the
Definitely.
step, you just go, you show up. And if you do that, so they say faith without works is dead.
Yes.
Okay. And we have this thing in our brains called the amygdala. And it's an actual organ in our brains that tell us whether to fight or flight. But it's a protection mechanism. And every time we try to step outside of our comfort zone, it tells us not to. It tries to protect us.
Yes.
Okay.
Yes.
Stepping out in faith is not something that you're doing at risk. Stepping out in faith is something you're simply doing because you believe. It's that simple.
That's beautiful the way you're explaining that, Mike.
It's that simple. And I just want people to understand. And I'm so unbelievably blessed that you and I were able to spend the time together that we were able to spend. I cannot thank you enough for being here. One of the things that I wanted to talk to you about, because I talked to your daughter for quite a while before, when we were
Yes.
scheduling you, we were talking about Childhelp. And one of the things we were talking about in particular is, and I didn't know about this until, and I was telling her this, I didn't know about this until recently, but there's a lot going on with human trafficking and child
Oh, yes.
trafficking, and the things that are happening. I mean, there's, in the last administration, there's 352,000 kids that got lost.
I know.
They can't find them. They don't know where they are. And what's interesting is you've been working at some version of Childhelp for 70 years.
Not quite.
I mean, it's
67 years.
right, but that's a long
Yes.
long time
Yes.
for you to be working. Well, I mean, you were working on orphanages before that. So
Yes.
that was some version of you
Right.
beginning this child, right?
That's
You
right.
went to Japan to entertain the troops at USO, and a typhoon landed you in a sneaking into an alley and finding 11 kids. That was, I believe, God leading you to Childhelp. That was the beginning. That was a long
Absolutely.
time ago, Sarah. And back then there was no conversation about an open border and
No.
human trafficking, sex trafficking, all this kind of stuff that happens. What's happened through our podcast, this program, is I've talked to people who have shared with me the details of what's happening out there. Like, there are girls that will get online and they'll accept an invitation to go to a party.
Yes.
And then they'll go to that party and somehow their drink gets tampered with. And 3 days later they wake up and they're 8 or 10 states away from where they live.
That's right. Mhm.
And they have no choice. They have no choice but to be a slave to whoever it is that's kidnapped them and taken them away.
That's right.
There's so much of that going on, and people don't understand. And you're bringing light to something and you've been doing it for a long, long time, that a lot of us didn't even know about. I had no idea this stuff was going on. I probably should have, but I didn't. And I wonder how many people who are listening to us are now understanding that this kind of thing is taking place, and they need to educate their kids. They need to take care of the
Absolutely.
children in their community.
There's no question about that. One of my favorite programs that we do in Childhelp is our prevention program. We're in schools throughout the United States and on 11 military bases outside the United States. But we never do that program that a child or children come up and say, this is happening to me. I didn't know where to go. And they can call our hotline, number and get help. They know they can get help immediately of what to do, where to go, who can be there. We have calls all the time on that hotline that you just would not believe. And children that are ready to commit suicide and step out in front of a truck because they are so abused. And that little boy reached into his pocket and found our number, 1-800 for a child, and called it. And we do not have anyone but degreed professionals answering our phone. We're the only hotline that does that, because we have children that are going to step out in front of that truck. And by the time we were finished, he said, "Are you my angel? My grandmother who died told me I'd have an angel." And he said, "Nobody's ever helped me like this." And, it just breaks your heart to hear these things. The children that this little girl, I was having lunch at one of our villages. It was in Virginia. And this little girl said, "Oh, are you a grandmother?" And I said, "Oh, yes." And she said, "Oh, I bet you're a good grandmother." I said, "Well, do you have a grandmother?" And she said, "No, I can't see her anymore." And I said, "Oh." So I asked the caregiver, what's with the story she can't see her grandma? Said she lived with her because of abuse. and the grandmother sold her for rent money. This child was 7 years old. So we have no idea what goes on in this world, Mike. It's really sad.
Yeah.
And these children really need help. And you know that animals help them so much. We had a little boy that saw his mother killed in front of his eyes, and he became mute. He couldn't talk. And so he was put into one foster home after the other. And he ended up being in 20 some odd different foster homes because they said he has vocal cords. He's just not talking. And then they give him away. So he had that trauma on top of the trauma. But by the time he reached our village, our speech therapist said, "Oh, I'll get him to talk." She couldn't. And then our animal therapist said, "I'm going to tell him that I'll give him one of the ponies." That we had 2 matching ponies, one chocolate and one vanilla. And so he said, "I'm going to give him chocolate to take care of and tell him that if he doesn't take care of chocolate, nobody will." And that he had to ride him and curry him and so forth.
Mhm.
So, and feed him. And so that little boy got up at 6 o'clock in the morning, ran down to the village to do that with the pony. And in 1 week, he put his arms around the pony's neck and said, "I love you." And it broke his silence. And he was fine after that. So I tease the therapist saying that the animals can do more than what they do sometimes.
It's
But
true, though. It's
yes,
true.
it is true. It's
Animals reach us in ways that humans can't.
yes. And anybody listening to your program, be aware of what's happening around you
Yeah.
because you can pick up things. And even if you're wrong, it's better to try and report something than to not report it. If you see it in a store, I can't tell you how many calls we get like that from grocery stores, department stores saying,
Yep.
"I see this mother just dragging this child along and bruises on his body." And so we have to be that voice for the child that can't be. So if people would just do that, that would be such a great stepping stone
Yeah,
to
if you
a
see
child's
something,
life.
if you see something, say something.
Absolutely. That means
So 1-800 for a child is
yeah.
your hotline. 1-800
Yes.
for a child.
Yes.
And the book is Healed, Your Miracle Awaits, written by Sara O'Meara. I cannot thank you enough.
Well, Mike, I enjoyed so much being on your show. And I can tell your spirit is a beautiful one and that you love God. And that is the answer to everybody's life, bar none. That is it. That's the solution to everything. And God loves us so much as if we were the only person in the world. If people would just realize the love that God has for us, they would never have to worry again because He does have a plan for our life. Our own plans can pale against His. Look, we had a plan, Yvonne and I, to be great actresses.
Yeah.
And we ended up with instead God's plan, which is so much more enriching and so delightful that we could do something for others. If we had been a great actress, so what? I mean, what have we done compared to helping others? And everybody listening on this show, on your show, is important. God made a plan for every single person on this earth, and nobody is unimportant. But if you miss what God wants you to do, then the cog in the wheel is missing because God brought that person in with a certain skill, a certain talent that you and I don't have.
Mhm.
So if everyone had, let's say, a healing gift or had the skill set you do in doing what you do, what a lopsided world it would be. Everybody means something to this world. And so go out and do it. Stand
Absolutely.
up for God.
Absolutely. Sara O'Meara, thank you so much for being our guest on the Mike Litton Experience. This has been
You are
amazing.
so welcome. Thank you, Mike. God bless.
Can I ask you a question? Did you know that there's a technology that uses sound waves that'll tell your brain what to do? There literally is. It's called newcalm.com. It can tell your brain to heal, tell your brain to sleep, tell your brain to do all kinds of things. It can get you fired up. It can be a pre-workout. Newcalm.com. and the promo code is Mike15. Newcalm.com, promo code Mike15 for an extra 15% off. Go today.
And that's a wrap. Another episode of the Mike Litton Experience in the books. Reach out to Mike on Instagram at the Mike Litton Experience.